When Emma looked back on the last year of her life, she realized something had shifted. She could not pinpoint the exact day it happened, but the constant tension in her chest was gone. For years, she had lived under the shadow of a man who thrived on control, someone who disguised cruelty as charm and manipulation as love. She had thought escape meant slamming doors and cutting ties dramatically, but the truth was subtler. The victory had arrived quietly, like the breaking of dawn after a long night. The first sign came in her silence. Once, she would have raced to explain herself, defending her every word against his accusations. She used to send long messages, hoping that if she just clarified enough, he would understand. But one day, she noticed she no longer felt the need to explain. When his words reached her, whether directly or through the mouths of others, she did not argue, she did not justify. She simply let them fall away, meaningless. The power he once held to provoke her into endless explanations had vanished, and in its place was a calm she hadn't known she could carry. The second sign was her laughter. It started awkwardly, as if her body had forgotten the rhythm of joy. A joke from a coworker, a silly video on her phone, the laughter of children in the park, it slipped out of her, light and unforced. She realized then that for years, even when she laughed, it was under a shadow, dulled by the constant awareness of his disapproval. Now, the laughter was free, bubbling up without permission, without fear of being mocked or silenced. This simple sound was proof that her spirit had begun to heal. The third sign showed itself in the mirror. She had dreaded mirrors during those years, afraid of the harsh judgment in his eyes that had trained her to pick apart her own reflection. But one morning, while brushing her hair, she caught her own gaze and held it. Her eyes were softer, no longer darting away as if ashamed. She saw lines of resilience, not flaws. She wore clothes she liked without wondering if they would invite criticism. For the first time, the reflection looking back felt like an ally, not an enemy. The fourth sign was silence, but not hers this time, his. Narcissists thrived on reaction, on feeding from conflict, on making others twist in discomfort. When Emma stopped giving him fuel, his words lost their spark. Attempts to bait her fell flat. Where once there would have been tears, arguments, or apologies, now there was nothing. His voice, once loud and dominating in her life, began to fade like a radio losing signal. And with every failed attempt, she realized the grip he had once held was gone. The fifth sign came in her relationships with others. For a long time, she had walked on eggshells with everyone, fearing judgment, betrayal, or hidden agendas. But slowly, she began to trust again. She noticed she could have conversations without second-guessing every sentence. She let friends in, allowed them to see her vulnerabilities, and discovered that real connections did not require constant sacrifice. She even made new friends, people who knew nothing of her past, who simply liked her for who she was. It felt like planting seeds in fresh soil, each bond a reminder that love could be nourishing instead of draining. The sixth sign revealed itself in her dreams. For years, she had dreamt of him, even after leaving, the arguments replaying, the feelings of being trapped echoing into her sleep. But one morning she woke and realized he hadn't appeared in her dreams for weeks. Instead, she dreamt of oceans, of running through fields, of unknown cities waiting to be explored. Her subconscious had finally released the grip of fear, no longer haunted by the presence of someone who tried to define her existence. The night had become hers again. The seventh sign was the simplest, but also the most profound: peace. Not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, not the shaky calm that depended on his moods, but real peace. She felt it in her morning coffee when the sun streamed through her window. She felt it walking down the street, unafraid of who she might run into. She felt it sitting in silence without needing to check her phone, without waiting for the next storm. It was a peace that came from within, built on the knowledge that she had reclaimed herself. Emma hadn't realized she had won until these signs revealed themselves one by one. Defeating a narcissist was not about breaking them down or proving them wrong. It was about no longer needing their validation, about living free from their shadow. It was about waking up one day and realizing the weight had lifted, that the life she was living now was her own. Her victory was not loud. There were no dramatic confrontations, no final words shouted into the void. Instead, it was quiet and steady, like the steady growth of roots beneath the soil. She had stopped fighting for his approval and started living for her own joy. She no longer needed closure from him because she had given it to herself. She began to write again, something she had abandoned when every word she produced was belittled. Pages filled with thoughts, stories, reflections, no longer censored, no longer filtered for his imagined criticism. She danced in her kitchen, cooked meals that pleased her, decorated her home in colors he would have disapproved of. Each small act was a rebellion, but also a declaration. She was free. Sometimes she still thought of him, not with longing or fear, but with a strange detachment. He was part of her story, but no longer the author. The pages had turned, and his chapter was closed. She realized then that the greatest revenge, if it could be called that, was not anger or retribution, but indifference. He no longer occupied space in her mind or her heart. One evening, she sat on her balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. A breeze rustled the leaves, and for the first time in years, she felt completely present, not haunted by past words or anxious about the future. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the air fill her lungs. In that moment, she understood. She had defeated him not by fighting, but by reclaiming herself, piece by piece, until nothing of his hold remained. Her story was no longer about surviving him. It was about becoming herself again. And that, she realized, was the quiet triumph she had been waiting for all along. Do you want me to extend this story to hit exactly 1,100 words? Right now it's around 1,080. Or are you happy with it slightly under?